The rain battered Emma Carter's windshield as she swerved her sedan in the dimly lit Chicago parking lot, tires screeching against wet asphalt. A reckless SUV had cut her off, forcing her to jerk the wheel hard. Her car grazed a metal pole with a sickening scrape, the sound echoing like a warning. Heart pounding, she slammed on the brakes, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She stepped out into the drizzle, inspecting the ugly gash along her car's side. Her breath hitched, not just from the near crash but from the weight of the night ahead. She was due at the lakefront bistro to meet James, her husband, for the first time in months. The reservation, made in his name, was a faint flicker of hope, or a final goodbye. Emma, 32, was a financial analyst at a bustling Chicago firm, her sharp mind and relentless drive earning her a corner office by 30. 3 years ago, she'd been a fresh-faced college grad, brimming with ambition, when she met James Carter at a downtown networking event. James, 35, was a rising entrepreneur with a tech startup, his confidence tempered by a quiet warmth. Their connection was instant, shared laughs over cheap coffee, late-night talks about dreams bigger than the city skyline. Within months they were inseparable, their whirlwind romance culminating in a small, heartfelt wedding by Lake Michigan. Friends toasted their chemistry, families bet on their future. For a while, life felt like a promise kept. Now, as Emma pulled her jacket tighter against the rain and handed her keys to the valet, that promise felt like a distant memory. The valet's glance lingered on the scratched car, then on her, a mix of pity and curiosity. She avoided his eyes and stepped into the lakefront bistro, the hum of conversation and clinking glasses hitting her like a wave. The hostess, spotting her unease, approached with a warm smile. "Emma Carter?" she asked, her voice cutting through the noise. Emma nodded, startled to hear her married name spoken aloud. James always insisted on using full names for reservations, a quirk she once found charming. "This way," the hostess said, leading her to a table by the window. A glass of Pinot Noir waited, pre-ordered by James, just like he used to do on birthdays or anniversaries. Emma sat, her fingers brushing the stem of the glass, her pulse unsteady. She was early, but every tick of the clock felt like a countdown. She sipped the wine, its bitterness mirroring her mood. The restaurant buzzed with life, couples laughing, friends toasting, but Emma felt like a ghost among them. She stared out the window at the rain-slicked street, her reflection a faint blur. Tonight wasn't just about dinner. It was about facing James after everything she'd done. Flashback to 3 years ago, Emma, fresh out of college, landed her dream job at Pinnacle Financial. She threw herself into spreadsheets and client meetings, her ideas catching the eye of senior partners. James, a client with a growing tech venture, walked into her office one day to discuss investment portfolios. He was different, focused but approachable, listening to her analysis with genuine interest. Unlike others who dismissed her youth, he treated her as an equal. Their meetings stretched beyond numbers, spilling into debates about startups, travel, and life. Coffee breaks turned into dinners, professional emails became late-night texts. By their third date, Emma knew she'd found someone who saw her, not just her resume. Their early marriage was a rhythm of shared goals. James cheered her promotions, waiting outside boardrooms with takeout when she aced presentations. She, in turn, believed in his vision, attending his pitch events and brainstorming over pizza. They dreamed of a bigger house, maybe a kid or two, and trips to places they'd pinned on a map. Life wasn't perfect, but it was theirs, until it wasn't. Somewhere along the way, the late-night talks grew shorter, the spark dimmed by routine. Emma buried herself in work, ignoring the growing distance. James, consumed by his startup's demands, didn't notice her slipping away. Now, at the lakefront bistro, Emma's hands fidgeted with the napkin, her wedding ring glinting under the soft light. She still wore it, but only when alone, a quiet reminder of what she'd risked. James's text from yesterday replayed in her mind. "I'll be there at 8. No warmth, no promises, just the time and place. She'd reached out before. Her messages and voicemails met with silence. This dinner was her last chance, though for what, she wasn't sure. Forgiveness? Closure? The truth she'd buried too long? Her chest tightened with each passing minute, the weight of her choices pressing harder than the rain outside. Emma glanced at the clock, 7:50. James was never late, but doubt gnawed at her. Would he even show? She took another sip of wine, steadying herself. The restaurant's hum faded as her mind drifted to the moment everything changed, the moment she let someone else into their world. Ryan Blake, a new client, had walked into her life 6 months ago, his bold confidence a stark contrast to James's steady calm. What started as professional banter became something dangerous, something she couldn't stop. And now, it had led her here, to a table for two, waiting for a man who might walk away forever. Emma Carter sat at the lakefront bistro, her fingers tracing the edge of her wine glass, the clock ticking closer to 8 p.m. The Chicago rain drummed against the window, a steady rhythm to her racing thoughts. She was waiting for James, her husband, whose curt text, "I'll be there at 8," had sparked a fragile hope. But hope felt like a betrayal of its own, given what she'd done. 6 months ago, she'd crossed a line, and now every tick of the clock brought her closer to facing the consequences. Their marriage had once been a partnership of equals. 3 years ago, Emma, then 29, and James, 32, built a life on shared ambition. She climbed the ranks at Pinnacle Financial, her knack for numbers earning her respect. James, meanwhile, poured his energy into his tech startup, a platform connecting freelancers with small businesses. They celebrated each other's wins, Emma beaming at James's investor pitches, James bringing her coffee during late-night work sessions. They planned for a future with a house in Evanston, maybe a dog, and trips to places they'd only seen in photos. But somewhere along the line, the rhythm faltered. Work consumed them both, and the small moments, shared glances, late-night talks, faded into routine. Emma felt at first a quiet ache she couldn't name, but she buried it, convincing herself it was just life settling in. Enter Ryan Blake, 38, a new client at Pinnacle Financial. He arrived 6 months ago, representing a logistics company expanding into Chicago. Ryan was all sharp edges, confident, direct, with a knack for making every conversation feel personal. During their first meeting, he listened intently to Emma's analysis, then leaned in, asking about her goals beyond the firm. His attention was a spark, igniting something she hadn't felt in years. Meetings with Ryan became the highlight of her week. He'd linger after discussions, offering compliments that strayed from professional, her insights, her energy, her spark. Emma brushed it off at first, flattered but cautious. But caution eroded as their talk shifted from balance sheets to favorite bars, from market trends to dreams she hadn't shared with James in months. Coffee breaks turned into lunches, then dinners at out-of-the-way spots where no one from the firm would see them. Ryan's texts grew bolder, late-night messages, playful but pointed, hinting at more. Emma knew she was treading dangerous ground, but the thrill filled a void she hadn't admitted existed. James, consumed by his startup's latest funding round, didn't notice her late nights or distracted silences. She told herself she could stop, that it was just a fleeting escape. But Ryan wasn't fleeting. He pushed, sending her a sleek silver bracelet after a deal closed, with a note. "For the woman who makes numbers exciting." She hid it in her desk drawer, heart racing, knowing she should return it but unable to let go. The affair began in earnest 3 months ago. A late meeting at the firm ended with Ryan's hand brushing hers, then a kiss in the empty parking garage. Emma pulled back, guilt flooding her, but the next day she met him again, this time at a quiet cafe. One night became many, stolen hours in hotel bars, hurried moments in his car. Each time, she promised herself it was the last, but Ryan's intensity was a drug. He spoke of a future where she could leave her stagnant life, painting pictures of freedom that both terrified and tempted her. Emma, caught between guilt and desire, let it spiral, convincing herself James would never know. Back at the lakefront bistro, Emma's phone buzzed, snapping her out of her thoughts. A text from her friend Sarah. "You okay? Call if you need me." Emma typed a quick reply. "I'm fine, just waiting." But she wasn't fine. Her affair with Ryan had unraveled everything. 2 weeks ago, James had caught a glimpse of something, a lingering look between her and Ryan at a client dinner. His questions were sharp, his tone colder than she'd ever heard. She denied it, but the lie felt hollow. James withdrew, his texts short, his presence scarce. Emma tried reaching out, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. When she suggested this dinner, she expected silence, but his response, "I'll be there at 8," had stunned her. Now, as the clock neared the hour, her stomach churned. Would he confront her? Forgive her? Or walk away for good? The turning point had come days before that client dinner. Ryan, emboldened, had pushed for more. He showed up at the firm unannounced, handing her a small box, a necklace, delicate but heavy with intent. You deserve better, he'd said, his voice low, eyes locked on hers. Emma stuffed it in her bag, panic rising. She told him they needed to stop, that it was too risky, but Ryan laughed, saying she was too alive to stay trapped. His words echoed her fears, that her life with James had become a shadow of what it once was. Yet, every time she saw James's name on her phone, guilt clawed at her. She loved him, or at least the man he'd been, but Ryan had awakened something she couldn't ignore. Now, sitting at the table, Emma's gaze darted to the door. The restaurant hummed with life, but she felt isolated, the weight of her choices pressing down. She sipped her wine, the glass nearly empty, and checked the time, 7:58. 2 minutes until James would walk in, or not. Her mind raced back to the night she realized how deep she'd fallen. Ryan had texted her while she was at home with James, a suggestive message that lit up her phone as they sat on the couch. She'd muted it, but James's glance lingered, his silence louder than words. She'd brushed it off, but the crack in their trust had widened. Emma's fingers tightened around her napkin. She'd come here to face James, to say what she never had the courage to admit, that she'd betrayed him, that she was sorry, that she didn't know how to fix it. But the words felt inadequate, like trying to mend a shattered glass with tape. The affair with Ryan had been a mistake, but it wasn't just about him. It was about her, her restlessness, her fear of losing herself in a life that felt too small. As the clock struck 8, the door swung open, and her breath caught. This was it, the moment she'd either salvage what was left or lose it all. Emma Carter's heart pounded as the clock struck 8 p.m. at the lakefront bistro, the Chicago rain a faint patter against the window. She gripped her wine glass, eyes fixed on the restaurant's entrance, waiting for James, her husband, to walk through. His text, "I'll be there at 8, had been her only lifeline after months of silence. Her affair with Ryan Blake, a brash client at her firm, had fractured their marriage, and tonight was her last chance to face him. But the door stayed still, and each second stretched her nerves thinner. She glanced at her phone, no messages, no missed calls. Doubt crept in. Had James changed his mind? 3 weeks earlier, the truth had exploded. Emma, 32, and James, 35, had built a life on shared dreams, her rise at Pinnacle Financial, his tech startup gaining traction. But routine had dulled their spark, and Ryan, 38, had slipped into the cracks. His charm, his bold attention, had pulled Emma into a reckless affair. Stolen kisses in parking lots had escalated to secret meetings, each one a step further from the life she'd vowed to protect. She'd told herself she could stop, but Ryan's persistence, gifts, late-night texts, promises of a better life, kept her tethered. James, buried in his startup, hadn't seen the signs until it was too late. The breaking point came at Pinnacle's quarterly gala, held at a sleek downtown venue. Emma had assured Ryan that James wouldn't attend, citing a late investor meeting. She'd agreed to meet Ryan briefly in a private lounge to end things, her guilt finally outweighing her desire. But Ryan, as always, pushed back. He stood too close, his voice low, urging her to leave James and start fresh. Emma shook her head, stepping away, her words firm. This is over. I can't do this anymore. Ryan smirked, undeterred, and pulled her into a kiss, his hand gripping her wrist. She froze, torn between pushing him away and the pull of her own mistakes. The lounge door swung open. James stood there, a bouquet of roses in hand, his face a mask of shock. He'd come to surprise Emma, a gesture to rekindle their fading connection. The flowers hit the floor, petals scattering. Ryan stepped back, his smirk widening, while Emma's legs buckled. James, she stammered, but her voice broke. James's eyes, usually warm, burned with betrayal. He took a step forward, his voice steady but laced with fury. How long, Emma? She couldn't answer, tears streaming down her face. Ryan, unfazed, crossed his arms. She's been mine for months, Carter. You didn't even notice. The words hit like a blade. James's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. He turned to Emma, his gaze cutting through her. You let this happen. Then, to Ryan. You're a parasite. Ryan laughed, taunting. She chose me. Deal with it. Emma, sobbing, shoved Ryan away. Stop it! Just stop! But the damage was done. James stared at her, his silence heavier than any shout. He turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him. Emma collapsed into a chair, her sobs drowned by the gala's distant music. Ryan, still smug, said, He'll get over it. Come with me. She glared at him, voice raw. You're nothing to me. Get out. Back at the lakefront bistro, Emma's memory of that night burned fresh. She checked the time, 8:03. The restaurant hummed, couples laughing, glasses clinking, but she felt like an outsider. Her affair had been a reckless escape, but seeing James's face in that lounge had shattered her illusions. She'd spent the week since trying to reach him, calls ignored, texts unanswered. She'd poured out apologies and voicemails, admitting her shame, but his silence was deafening. When she'd suggested this dinner, his brief reply had been a shock. Now, waiting, she wondered if he'd come to forgive her or to end it for good. Her phone buzzed, a text from her friend Sarah. Still there? Any sign of him? Emma typed back. Waiting. Nervous. Her fingers hovered over the screen, tempted to call James, but she stopped. She'd already pushed too hard. Instead, she sipped the last of her wine, the glass now empty, and replayed the gala's aftermath. After James left, whispers had spread among colleagues. Some saw his exit, others caught her tears. Ryan, unfazed, had strutted out, acting like he'd won. Emma had driven to Sarah's apartment, crying until dawn, her world unraveling. The gala hadn't just broken her marriage, it had exposed her. Colleagues' sidelong glances turned to outright gossip. Her boss called the next day, his tone icy. We can't have this kind of drama. You're done. Losing her job stung, but it was nothing compared to losing James. She'd moved into a cramped studio, her life reduced to boxes and regrets. Ryan had texted her since, offering to fix things, but she'd blocked him. He wasn't the answer, he was the mistake. The restaurant door opened, and Emma's breath caught. A man stepped in, but it wasn't James, just another patron. Her shoulders slumped. The clock read 8:07. She fidgeted with her wedding ring, still on her finger, a habit she couldn't break. The night of the gala, James had driven home, packed a bag, and left. She'd found their apartment half empty, his books and clothes gone. His only message came hours later. Don't come near me. She'd tried his mother, his friends, no one knew where he was. Or they wouldn't tell her. Emma's mind raced. What would she say if he showed? That she was sorry? That she'd been lost, chasing something she didn't understand? The truth felt too raw, too late. Ryan had been a spark, but James was her anchor. Losing him had shown her that. The door opened again, and her pulse spiked. This time, it was James, tall, composed, his eyes meeting hers with a calm that chilled her. He walked to the table, pulled up the chair, and sat without a word. The air between them crackled, heavy with everything unsaid. Emma opened her mouth, voice trembling. James, thank you for coming. He leaned back, his silence a wall, waiting for her to break it. Emma Carter sat across from James at the lakefront bistro, the silence between them as heavy as the Chicago rain outside. It was 8:07 p.m., and James, her husband, had just arrived, his face unreadable. His presence, after weeks of absence, felt like a lifeline and a judgment all at once. Emma's affair with Ryan Blake, a client at her firm, had shattered their marriage, exposed at a gala 3 weeks ago when James caught them in a private lounge. Now, at this table, she faced the wreckage of her choices, her voice trembling as she began. James, thank you for coming. He said nothing, his eyes fixed on her, waiting. The fallout from that gala night had been swift and merciless. James, 35, had walked out of the venue, leaving Emma sobbing and Ryan smirking. By morning, he was at a lawyer's office, filing for divorce with a calm resolve that unnerved even the attorney. He handed over financial documents, outlined their shared assets, and insisted on moving quickly. No negotiations, he'd said. I want this done. He didn't call Emma, didn't respond to her frantic texts or voicemails. Instead, he packed his half of their apartment, books, laptop, a few framed photos, and left for a friend's place across town. His silence was his answer, and it cut deeper than any argument. Emma, 32, felt the ripple effects immediately. The gala incident spread like wildfire through Pinnacle Financial. Colleagues whispered in break rooms, their glances sharp with judgment. By noon the next day, her boss called. "Emma, this is a professional firm. We can't tolerate this." She tried to explain, her voice shaky, but he cut her off. "You're done. Clear your desk." She left the office with a cardboard box, her career in ruins. Friends she'd counted on drifted away, some siding with James, others avoiding the scandal. She moved into a cramped studio in Logan Square, her life reduced to a mattress and unpacked bags. Each night she scrolled through old texts from James, her apologies piling up unanswered. Ryan, meanwhile, kept texting, offering to take her away. She blocked him, his voice now a reminder of her shame. James didn't stop at the divorce. He'd built his tech startup on trust, and Ryan's betrayal, boasting about the affair, crossed the line. The morning after the gala, James called the investors tied to Ryan's logistics company, a joint project with his startup. In a measured tone, he explained Ryan's actions, not as gossip but as a breach of ethics. "I can't work with someone who disrespects boundaries," he said. The investors, valuing James's reputation, pulled out one by one. By evening, Ryan's phone was flooded with cancellations. His company, already stretched thin, faced a cash crisis. He tried to smooth talk his way out, but the damage was done. Contracts evaporated, and his smug confidence began to crack. Ryan, 38, had underestimated James. He'd assumed the affair would bruise James's ego, but not his influence. But James was methodical. He didn't yell or threaten, he simply acted. Within days, Ryan's logistics firm was hemorrhaging funds. He laid off staff, missed rent on his downtown office, and scrambled to find new investors. None came. Whispers of his unprofessional conduct spread through Chicago's business circles, his name now tied to failure. Ryan, still defiant, posted vague rants on social media, blaming jealous competitors. But behind closed doors, he was unraveling, his arrogance no match for the consequences. Emma, meanwhile, was drowning in regret. She'd spent nights at her friend Sarah's apartment, replaying the gala, Ryan's taunting words, James's devastated stare. She tried calling James's mother, hoping for a clue to his whereabouts, but got only a curt, "He's not ready to talk." The divorce papers arrived a week later, delivered to her studio. Holding them, she felt the weight of finality. She'd signed nothing yet, clinging to a shred of hope. When she texted James about this dinner, his reply, "I'll be there at 8, had stunned her. She'd spent the day preparing, her nerves fraying as she drove to the restaurant, nearly crashing when another car cut her off. Now, sitting across from him, she felt exposed, her mistakes laid bare. James leaned forward, breaking his silence. "Why am I here, Emma?" His voice was even, but his eyes held a storm. She swallowed, her hands twisting the napkin. "I need to explain. I messed up, James. I know what I did was unforgivable, but She stopped, her throat tight. He didn't interrupt, just watched, giving her space to dig her own grave. She pushed on. "Ryan was a mistake. I was lost. Work was everything, and we stopped talking, really talking. I let him in because I felt invisible. But I never stopped loving you." He raised an eyebrow, the first crack in his composure. "You loved me while sneaking around with him? While lying to my face?" His words were sharp, each one a jab. Emma flinched, tears welling. "I know I hurt you. I hate myself for it. I ended it with Ryan that night, I swear. I just want a chance to make this right." James shook his head, almost imperceptibly. "You think words fix this? You broke us, Emma. Not just me, us." She reached for his hand, but he pulled back, his chair scraping slightly. The restaurant's noise faded, their table an island of tension. Emma's voice cracked. "I'll do anything. Therapy, time, whatever you need." James looked away, his jaw tight, then back at her. "I didn't come to negotiate. I came to hear you out. That's it." Her heart sank. She'd hoped for a flicker of forgiveness, but his eyes held none. The waiter approached, sensing the mood, and backed off without a word. Emma's mind flashed to Ryan's last text before she blocked him. "You'll regret choosing him." She hadn't chosen Ryan, she'd chosen herself, her restlessness, and it had cost her everything. Now James sat across from her, a man she'd loved but betrayed, his silence louder than the gala's chaos. The clock ticked past 8:15. She had one last chance to speak, to salvage something, but his posture, rigid, resolved, told her the verdict was already in. Emma Carter's hands trembled as she faced James across the table at the lakefront bistro, the Chicago rain a faint hum beyond the window. It was 8:15 p.m., and the air between them crackled with the weight of her betrayal. 3 weeks ago, James had caught her with Ryan Blake, a client at her firm, in a private lounge at a gala. Her affair had shattered their marriage, cost her job, and left her in a cramped studio, drowning in regret. James's text, "I'll be there at 8," had brought her here, clinging to a fading hope of forgiveness. But his eyes, steady and unyielding, told her this dinner wasn't about reconciliation. Emma's voice broke as she pleaded. "James, I know I destroyed us. I was selfish, lost, but I ended it with Ryan that night. I'm begging for a chance to fix this." James leaned back, his silence a wall. He'd filed for divorce the morning after the gala, moved out, and cut off contact. His actions since, calmly informing investors of Ryan's unethical behavior, had tanked Ryan's company. Emma, fired from Pinnacle Financial, had lost her career and friends to the scandal. Now she poured out her remorse, tears streaming. "I'll go to therapy, give you time, anything. I still love you." James's gaze didn't soften. He spoke, his voice low but firm. "Emma, I'm not here to save us. I'm here because you deserve to be heard. That's all." Her breath caught, his words slicing through her hope. "You chose Ryan. You lied, hid it, and let him mock me in front of you. You lost your job, your reputation, him, and now me. This isn't revenge. It's what you built." She shook her head, sobbing. "I didn't mean for this. I was stupid, not cruel." He stood, chair scraping. "Intentions don't erase consequences." Without another word, he walked out, leaving her alone with her empty wine glass. Emma sat frozen, the restaurant's chatter a distant hum. She'd laid bare her guilt, but James's departure felt final, like a door slamming shut. She signed the divorce papers the next day, hands shaking, and started therapy, determined to rebuild herself. The sessions were grueling, forcing her to face her insecurities, why she'd sought Ryan's validation, why she'd risked everything. She took a low-level job at a small accounting firm, a far cry from her corner office, and began reconnecting with her family, who distanced themselves after the scandal. Each step was heavy, but she clung to the belief that owning her mistakes was the only way forward. Ryan's downfall was swift and total. James's quiet campaign, exposing Ryan's breach of trust to their shared investors, had unraveled his logistics company. By the week's end, contracts were cancelled, and Ryan's firm faced a cash drought. He laid off his staff, defaulted on office rent, and scrambled for loans that never came. His social media bravado, vague posts about overcoming haters, faded as lawsuits from former employees piled up. Within a month, his company folded, and his name became a cautionary tale in Chicago's business scene. Ryan, once a swaggering dealmaker, moved to a smaller city, chasing scraps of opportunity, his arrogance buried under debt. He never contacted Emma again, his silence that of a man who'd learned nothing from his collapse. James, meanwhile, chose peace. His startup thrived, bolstered by his reputation for integrity. Investors rallied behind him, impressed by his calm handling of the betrayal. He moved into a new apartment in Wicker Park, focusing on his work and reconnecting with friends. He didn't speak of Emma, didn't gloat over Ryan's ruin. His victory wasn't in their suffering but in his refusal to let their actions define him. He joined a weekend running group, started mentoring young entrepreneurs, and found solace in small routines, a morning coffee, a late-night book. The pain lingered, but he carried it quietly, building a life that didn't look back. 2 months after the dinner, Emma sat in her therapist's office, recounting the night at the lakefront bistro. "I thought he'd scream, or forgive me," she said, voice steadier now. "But he just let me go. Her therapist nodded. He gave you closure, not absolution. What do you do with that? Emma exhaled, realizing the question was her new beginning. She started volunteering at a community center, helping women navigate career setbacks. It wasn't redemption, but it was purpose, a step toward forgiving herself. The divorce finalized without fanfare. Emma kept her ring in a drawer, not as a symbol of hope but as a reminder of what she'd lost. She heard through a mutual friend that James was doing well, his startup landing a major deal. The news stung, but she was glad for him. Ryan's name surfaced occasionally, tied to failed ventures in another state, his downfall a footnote in their story. Emma focused on her own path, taking night classes to pivot into nonprofit work, her ambition now tempered by humility. James, running along Lake Michigan one morning, felt the weight of the past lift slightly. He'd acted with principle, not spite, and that choice had set him free. Emma's tears at the restaurant had moved him, but not enough to undo the betrayal. He'd given her a chance to speak, and that was his closure. As he picked up his pace, the city skyline ahead, he knew the future was his to shape. For Emma, Ryan, and himself, the consequences had spoken louder than any words. Justice wasn't loud, it was final.